You know, when you build anything that you want to last, you always start with a really strong foundation. And it's exactly the same for your cloud architecture. So today, we're diving into the absolute fundamentals of AWS backup and recovery. You know, the stuff that makes sure what you build stays standing no matter what happens.
So let me ask you a question, and it's a really important one. Is your data truly safe? It's easy to think so. I mean, AWS gives you this incredibly robust, resilient infrastructure. But here's the thing they make very, very clear. The ultimate responsibility for protecting the data you put inside that infrastructure, well, that's on you.
I want you to just imagine that feeling for a second. That's sinking in your stomach. A critical file gets deleted by mistake, an entire database is suddenly corrupted. See, it's really not a matter of if something is going to go wrong, it's just a matter of when. And when it does, your most valuable asset can be gone in a flash. And this is exactly why we have to architect for resilience from the very beginning.
Now, the good news here is that AWS doesn't just leave you hanging. They give you a really powerful toolkit designed specifically for these moments. We're going to look at 4 essential services that basically act as lifelines for your data when you need them the most. Think of these as the absolute core building blocks for data safety.
Okay, first up, let's talk about EBS snapshots. So, your servers on AWS, they run on these virtual hard drives called EBS volumes. A snapshot is, for all intents and purposes, a perfect photograph of that entire drive at one specific moment in time. It is your fundamental go-to tool for server recovery.
Now, what about your databases, right? Things like MySQL or PostgreSQL. For those, AWS offers this amazing managed solution. With services like RDS and Aurora, AWS literally handles the backups for you automatically. It takes snapshots and logs transactions so you can restore to a really precise moment. It's incredibly powerful, and it's so simple to turn on. And then we get to things like DynamoDB, your high-speed NoSQL databases. And this is where things get really, really cool. It's called Point-in-Time Recovery, or PITR for short, and it is a total game changer. It's continuously backing up your data, which lets you wind back the clock to any single second within the last 35 days. Insane, right?
And last but not least, for all the files you're storing in S3, there's a super simple feature called versioning. Honestly, just think of it as the ultimate undo button. When you enable it on an S3 bucket, every single time you overwrite or delete a file, S3 just secretly keeps the old version safe for you. This one feature is an absolute lifesaver against those common, everyday mistakes.
All right, so we've seen the tools in our toolkit, but how do we actually use them when things go wrong? How do you go from that moment of sheer panic to the calm feeling of being back in control? Let's walk through it.
Okay, imagine this. Your main server drive gets corrupted. Total disaster, right? Well, not really. It's actually a pretty simple 3-step dance. You go find the last known good snapshot from before the problem, you create a brand new clean drive from it, and then you just swap it into your server. Boom, you're back online and you didn't have to rebuild a single thing from scratch. Okay, next scenario. Someone on your team accidentally drops a huge critical table in your database. Ouch. What now? Well, with RDS backups, you don't even touch the old broken one. Instead, you just launch an entirely new, restored database from the moment right before the disaster. Then, all you have to do is point your application over to the new, healthy instance. Problem solved.
And what about that overwritten config file we talked about? With S3 versioning, it is just beautifully simple. Seriously, you just go find the file, you look at its version history, and you tell S3 to make the previous correct version the current one again. A major crisis can be averted in, like, 30 seconds. It's amazing.
Okay, so we've got the tools, we know the recovery steps. Seems like we're all set, right? Well, not quite. There's one more thing, a golden rule that really holds this entire strategy together. And without it, everything we've just talked about is basically built on fragile assumptions. And it's this quote right here. An untested backup is just a hope. I want you to let that sink in for a second. Having backups feels great. It gives you a sense of safety, but it is a false sense of security until you have actually successfully restored from them. An untested backup isn't a plan, it's a hope. And, you know, hope is not a strategy. So why is testing so important? Well, it is so much more than just checking a box. It validates that your backups aren't corrupted. It confirms that the recovery steps you wrote down actually work in the real world. Crucially, it tells you your actual recovery time, not just the one you guessed. And maybe most importantly, it trains your team so they know exactly what to do when a real crisis hits. So, how do we pull all of this together into something you can actually use? To wrap this all up,
I want to leave you with a clear, actionable blueprint. This is the checklist that every cloud architect should be using to build true data resilience.
Okay, here it is. First, you got to know what you're protecting. Identify all your critical data. Then go enable automated backups and versioning everywhere you possibly can. Next, you have to define your objectives. That's your RPO, how much data can you afford to lose, and your RTO, how quickly do you need to be back up and running. Then, write the whole process down, schedule regular drills to practice it, and make sure you review and update that plan every single quarter so it never gets out of date.
Look, at the end of the day, if you take away just one single thing from all this, let it be this. Data resilience isn't just some feature you can bolt on at the end. It's not an afterthought. It has to be the foundation of your architecture, a core design principle from day one.
So I'm going to leave you with one final question to really think about. Not when was your last backup, but when was your last successful restore? And if you don't have an immediate answer to that question, well, now you know exactly what your next priority should be.